Welcome back to the Card Floppers Podcast, your home for casual and kitchen table Magic Gathering content. I'm your host, Alex, and tonight I am joined by Sean.
Hello.
Perry.
How's it going?
And Teesa.
Hello.
And tonight we're going to talk about some new commander brews that we're currently working on, our process for how we pick out our commanders, what we decide to, how we figure out a direction to take them, and then maybe have some little group discussion. Maybe some other people have some suggestions for cards that they wouldn't normally play to the other ones, much similar like we've done in the past with other build casts and talking about our decks. So to get right into it, we're going to go down the list here and talk about what commander we are currently working on. And then we're going to go into our process of how we found that commander and just how we find commanders in general. So, Sean, start us off, buddy.
Ooh, I get to start. Okay. I'm looking at Rexiel, the Risen Deep here. He's 3 colorless plus 2 blue and 1 black for 6 total. A little big, in my opinion, for a commander like that. That CMC is not too great. I might put in a little ramp there to sort of compensate for that. But he has Island Walk, Swamp Walk, and the key thing here is whenever Rexiel the Risen Deep deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead.
Nasty.
It's a little mean. So obviously there's a bit of a mill theme going on there.
Yeah. It does have a steep cost, though. The card itself, it's a big body. It's got to make it around a bunch of turns.
It's a 5/8, yeah. So it's not going to do a whole lot of damage, but it's going to be difficult for people to take it out.
Right.
Without a kill spell. I don't think it's going to end up getting killed by combat damage at all, just because it's got so much toughness. It's a 5/8 legendary Kraken. Fun stuff. I think I might even throw a little bit of tribal stuff in there, because there's a lot of cool effects you can get if you go with creatures that are also Krakens or Leviathans or Serpents.
Uh-huh.
They're all pretty big, but there's things like Fleet Swallower. That's a 7-drop, 5 any color, 2 blue. When it attacks, target player puts the top half of his library rounded up to their graveyard. So he's like, reminds me a little bit of Ulamog there, just no exile.
Right. So how did you come across Captain Rexiel here?
Demir's actually one of my favorite color combos to play.
Yep.
So I was just kind of browsing on Cockatrice, actually, by color. And I was going through, and I found a lot of legendary creatures that I kept some tabs on, and I went through a little list I made, and I do that a lot sometimes. I'll just go through lists of legendary creatures and see what would make a good commander, things that have stuff that's easy to build around. And Rexiel's kind of stood out, at least in my opinion, for being really, really a great mill-based commander.
Yeah.
Just the Island Walk and Swamp Walk that he has pinned onto him. I was like, oh, that's already really good. But he can also cast things for free. Anything that says cast without paying its mana cost is a good card.
That's true. It's very true. Okay, so a couple questions here with Rexiel here.
Yep.
You pretty much went over what drew you to him. You like the Dimir color. You like what he's doing. Now, picking him out to build around, are you thinking about the card flopper meta? Are you going on that strong side of like, I just really dig Dimir stuff? Are you looking at like, I mean, because naturally my brain goes to, well, there's a lot of people who play black and a lot of people who play blue in our circle,
Yeah, exactly.
So this could be very powerful against certain decks. We're not going to name names or anything like that, but it could be very strong against some specific decks in our group. So does that come into effect at all, or are you just kind of like challenging yourself with the mill concept? Or
a bit, yeah. I think actually, in part, it's going to go really well with your Vial Smasher deck, because you're going to be casting a lot of big spells, and those are going to be going into your graveyard, so then
That's
I
true.
get to cast your big spells for free, which is interesting. And I think
That's
he
very
kind of
possible.
fits well into a lot of different metas. Any meta where people are playing big spells is just good for him, because you can get anything out of the graveyard play for free. So anyone who's playing like big board wipes or like really powerful instants or sorceries, uh, he's going to come in handy just to be able to recur someone else's graveyard in
Right.
your favor.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be big spells. I mean, you're going to be able to get some ramp spells out of this. You're going to be able to get some card draw spells out of this, theoretically. Trying to think of some of those early ones. Myself being somebody who plays a lot of tutors, they're not big spells by any means, but being able for you to cast Enlighten Tutor or something like that, from my graveyard. I think that the wording on that is search your library, right?
I think so, yeah.
As I do a quick search.
My only thing about that is really it's going to be hard to get a lot of value out of early game spells or the smaller ones
Well,
like that,
yeah,
because
you're right.
he is going to be coming out in the late game.
He's like a turn 7
sure.
swing, essentially.
But if you have enough mill, you can sort of set up for that pretty well.
That's true. Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. All right, Perry, who are you building right now, and how did you come across them?
I am building a new deck around Teesa Karlov, which is 2 colorless, a white and a black mana. Her whole deal is doubling abilities that are triggered by creatures dying. And then as a little added bonus, she gives creature tokens under your control, vigilance, and lifelink, which honestly she'd be fine without that ability. But adding that ability and the fact that she is all about creatures dying, not just non-token creatures, definitely makes her want to be a token deck, because tokens are kind of like the most cost-effective creatures you can have. You usually can get more of them for the same price of like normal creatures, if that makes sense. And if any creature is dying and she's giving bonuses to tokens that you control, it makes more sense to have token creatures than normal creatures. So I came across her using one of probably the most helpful commander sites, EDH Rec. I was just perusing the top commanders list, and I actually chose to sort it by color. I was looking specifically at white and black because they're 2 colors that I think fit really well together, but I don't have a lot of experience with. So I knew I wanted to build around Orzhov. It's very powerful. The removal that white and black have are the strongest of all colors. So if you put them together, you have a lot of just access to great cards to interact with the rest of the board, especially with Commander when you're dealing with 3, 4 enemies instead of just one. Removal can be really important. And
Definitely.
I went about choosing her mostly because it was just something I wanted to try out. A lot of my previous decks have been about making big creatures and keeping creatures alive, but the idea of getting value out of killing creatures was very different, and I felt like you could take use of that really well, because it's kind of hard to prevent a creature you want from dying, but it's hard to keep a creature alive. The only way around her ability is exiling creatures that you don't want me to get triggers off of. So that was a powerful, powerful thing.
Yeah, nice. And I like the fact that this is not in your wheelhouse of colors, so it is kind of you gotta go a different route than you normally would. So I think that's awesome. Now, are you gonna go? Well, we can talk about that in a second. Okay, so Teesa, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, sweet. Who is the commander you're building around, and how did you come
So
across
I
them?
am building an Omnath Locus of the Royal, and I came across it, so I got myself a bundle from Ikoria and pulled both Song of Creation and Genesis Ultimatum. and went, ooh, these could be fun in a commander deck, and went looking for a commander that had synergy with them and landed on Omnath.
And what does Omnath do?
Yeah.
Can you go over the stats and stuff, T?
So Omnath, Locus of the Royal, it's 1 colorless, a green, a blue, and a red for a 3/3. When Omnath, Locus of the Royal, enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. It also has, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target elemental you control. If you control 8 or more lands, draw a card.
Nice. And how did you come across lovely Omnath here?
Omnath has always been on my radar in all of his various forms. I've played against a bunch of the Locus of Mana decks because mono green was the main color in the group that I played with before Card Floppers. So when I saw this one, I just sort of went, this could be an interesting way to get my tribal in, but I could also do some landfall stuff and just try some things that I don't usually do without getting too far away from my comfort zone.
Nice. All right. And lastly, myself. I chose, so the deck that I'm currently working on, I chose to do a Vial Smasher and Timna partner commander deck. So it'll be in Mardu colors. And then I'm also giving myself the stipulation of a companion in using Obosh, the Prey Piercer. So it's a lot there. There's 3 of them essentially, but I'll go over it slow. So Vial Smasher the Fierce is a 2/3 that's 1 generic, a black and a red mana. And whenever you cast your first spell each turn, Vial Smasher the Fierce deals damage equal to that spell's converted mana cost to an opponent chosen at random. And then Timna the Weaver is a 2/2 for 1 generic, a white, and a black with lifelink. Oh, also Vial Smasher has partner, which means you can have 2 commanders if both have partner. And then Timna the Weaver, lifelink. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X cards. And then this has partner as well. So the idea is just, I've never used Timna before. I have played with Vial Smasher. Myself, I don't even realize how Timna can be utilized best yet, which is one of the reasons why I want to build around it. I have played with the pre-con deck that both of these cards came in. I don't know if Timna came in it, but Vial Smasher came in the Yidris Cascade deck, and I love that deck. So that was where I figure it's time to work on Vial Smasher. And then with Ikoria coming out, much like T said, I am choosing Obosh the Prey Piercer, who has Companion, and using that clause. So Obosh the Prey Piercer is a 3/5 for 3 generic and 2 hybrid Rakdos mana. So you can either play it, basically mana is with black or red and then black and red. It is a legendary creature. It has Companion. Your starting deck contains only cards with odd converted mana costs and land cards. If a source you control with an odd converted mana cost would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. The idea for myself is to try to double damage as much as I possibly can through attacks and big spells and those kind of things. It doesn't work with loss of life. It needs to be dealing damage. But for the most part, and it does proc off of Vial Smasher because Vial Smasher is the one that deals the damage equal to the spell's converted mana cost. So, and they're all odd spells. It's going to be an interesting challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. So that's pretty much mine and what I chose. So, the process of when we decide to break down a commander deck that we want to build. Sean, do you have, now it's something to say here, all of us in this podcast, I guess maybe besides myself, are fairly new to the building process in relative terms, in the world of Magic. We're not like the grumps of old, kind of like the Tiki and the Rider and the the Jambros. And I'm kind of in the middle between these groups, I'd say, starting in the around 2010 or something like that. But you guys are kind of the newest in the group, and I don't mean that with any kind of negative connotations or whatever, but it's definitely known that you are probably some of the newer players in our group. How do you approach the process of building a deck? And we'll start with Sean. Do you have a set parameter that you follow, or do you have a method that you follow? Have you picked up any tips from other players? How do you kind of break it down after you've chosen Rexiel?
That is an interesting question because I don't really have a system. It just sort of falls into place differently every time. Usually what I'll do is at least take the commander side and then think, what do these colors do well? What does the commander do? Where does it overlap? And in this case, black and blue, good at milling, and that's the overlap right there. He's mill dependent. Those colors mill well. Usually it's not that difficult to find some direction to take it in just because Magic works in that way where the colors are supposed to do something and they're good at this, and the cards that are in those colors are obviously going to be good at those things as well. In this case, black, blue, mill. I'll just look for those kinds of cards, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say by that really, other than
no. So you're basically saying that you pick the mill concept and then you begin the search to find mill cards. Is that what you're saying?
I pretty much just look for milling cards from there. I'll look at things like well, here I was finding like Mirko Vosk, things like that, things that are going to put things in the graveyard. Nemesis of Reason, not Ulamog, but Fleet Swallower. Whispering Madness, even things with like wheel effects are pretty good for that. Anything really that's going to get a lot of cards into the graveyard in a short amount of time.
Right.
And then once I'm there, I've got a decent enough card base where I'm going to start trying to think of how do I turn this into a win condition. And in this case, I went away from mill and started to look at what can I do with all of those cards in the graveyard, because I don't want to win just by milling everyone out. That's boring. And that doesn't really tie into Rexiel at all. So what I ended up doing from there was looking for creatures, instants, sorceries, artifacts, anything that's going to sort of let me play around with graveyards. So I would find things like things that are going to put creatures onto the battlefield, things that are going to let me play cards from their graveyard like Rexiel does. So I'm looking at things like Extract from Darkness. That's kind of both in one. That's going to put things into your graveyard and then let me get a creature onto the battlefield. So cheating things out is a kind of a theme here. Memory Plunder's good. Does the same thing as Rexiel, cast target instant or sorcery without paying its CMC. Diluvian Primordial, same thing. Cast up to one target sorcery or instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard without paying its CMC. A lot of things like that. And then I even went in and started to see what I could do with just having a lot of cards in the graveyard. So there's things like Consuming Aberration that are going to give you benefits when there are a lot of cards in the graveyard. So that thing's going to get huge. And one of my personal favorite cards ever printed, actually, is Drown in the Lock. It's a blue and a black for a choose one counter target spell with CMC equal or less than the number of cards in its controller's graveyard, or destroy target creature with CMC less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. It works so well in mill decks, and I've put it in like every single Demir colored standard deck that I've ever built because it's
nice.
They came out of Null Drain, and as soon as I saw Spoiler for it, I'm like, oh, that's a good card. I like that card because it's so cheap and it can be so powerful. Like you can counter so many things once you get going on your mill for 2 mana. Yes,
right.
Usually you can only do something like that with like a quench, and even then that has the stipulation that can just pay more mana and get out of it. But that's 2 mana for a guaranteed counterspell as long as your deck's working right. I love that card.
Yeah, it's cool. I've never played with that one before. That's really neat.
Oh, it's so good.
Okay, so that was a pretty concise way that you go about it. Now, do you do most things on the internet first, as far as net decking and looking up ideas that way, and then move it to
Oh, for
paper?
sure.
Now, I will say we're in a weird quarantine time that a lot of our
Yeah.
stuff is just the digital way, anyways, because our collections, like, I could build it in paper, but
Even if
sometimes
it's
it's easier just to
not
look at the deck.
quarantine time, just because I am newer to Magic, I don't really have like a huge wealth of cards to pick through. So what I'll
Yep.
do is I'll go through the deck a few times, make sure I have it the way I want it, and then once I'm 100% that these are the 100 cards I want, I'll take out all the basic lands, and then I'll go into MTG Goldfish or something like that, and I'll export it to like TCG Player or Card Kingdom, and I'll just order them all one at a time.
Yeah.
TCG is great for that actually, because you can go and like sort it so the shipping cost is less or something like
I
that.
love TCG.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty nice. Like, well, I think this time around, if you guys don't know how to use it, but yeah, when you optimize your cart, like, well, I can pay less, but I kind of want like maybe only 2 packages to come to my house this time instead of like
Yeah.
95.
So
So
yeah,
I'll
you
just
can
pay the
customize
extra.
it.
Right. I'll
Yeah.
just pay the extra to get it mainly from direct shipments or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
TCG's
to give
great.
that to you as an option.
Yep. All right, Perry. Anything you do differently from Sean, or your process similar, or what would you say?
So definitely going into building a commander can be a little mind-boggling when there's so many cards to choose from, and you only can choose 100, and that includes your
Right.
lands. So I'd love to say that I'm so experienced, I have memorized every card in Magic, and I know what's going to work well. But we all know that most people are not at that level, especially not us newer players. So I would say that my two main tricks to building a deck is, well, first I'll try to assess what the goal of the deck is, the theme. So in this case, it's tokens, things that have abilities like persist, where they'll die and create tokens, and then taking advantage of things dying. So in black, that's a lot of enchantments, um, and even creatures that will ping someone, gain you life when a creature dies. That would happen twice if I have my commander
Right.
out. So the two places I look for deck building is, first I'll look in my collection. I have like a binder of the more worthy cards, the cards that are worth more, that I own. So I'll look in the colors that I'm building in, see if anything is going to fit. That would save me some money, prevent me from buying a whole like 60 cards, maybe bring it down to 50 cards. And then I will use websites, because there is so much great information and tools that people have taken the time to create online. So as I mentioned before, EDH Rec is a really great site for that. For example, Orzhov is not a color combination I've built with much. So if I looked under their Orzhov section, I can see the Orzhov commander staples. And that really can help you fill out your deck with the stuff you need before you start going for the flavor. So that's more of your mana base that Orzhov is relying around, your utility cards, your artifacts, and your like removal. It gives you the most popular removal that you'd like to have in your deck, some board wipes. So once I have all that, you can go into the specific commander you're building around. You can find cards that synergize well with that. They have a stat of how many decks that have that commander this card is found in, and that really gives you a good idea of what other people are building, people who maybe have more experience than you. If they're pairing up these two cards, then maybe you should as well.
Right.
So you can take advantage of the stuff people have already done, but still be creating your own deck. So I would definitely recommend, if you're new to it, especially, to use websites that have done a lot of the work for you, where they can tell you what cards they think would go well with a specific commander, and you can pick and choose from there what you exactly want to do with it. So I would say I combine my own collection with cards that people will say go well with it. I'll pay attention to if anyone in our group has any recommendations, because they've got a lot more experience than me. And then, like Sean, once I've play tested it, used it online, done some practice drawing, maybe some practice games on Friday nights, you can just order it from TCG or Card Kingdom. I'm a big fan of both of those.
Right. Yeah, it seems pretty legit. Yeah, EDH Rec is incredible, and if you have not been there, I will add it in the links down below in the description, so you know where to find it. And what other ones we talked about? We said TCG Player. We said EDH Rec. Is there any other sites that you guys use besides those two? I'll use
MTG
Scryfall a
Goldfish.
lot.
MTG Goldfish.
MTG Goldfish is wonderful. Yep, that's a great one too. EDH Rec, one of their sites where they pull the decks from is actually MTG Goldfish, so they work great as a pair. Same with Scryfall. I think they have links pretty much to both of those places with those decks. Another random one that I use sometimes, if I can actually go to it, if I can find it off the dime, is mtgassist.com. And it basically is a site where you can search cards similar to the cards you're trying to look for. So when you click on a card or you search a card in MTG Assist, it will actually populate a list of cards similar to Assassin's Trophy. So then you can kind of go down the list and find other cards that do similar things, and they kind of rate it top to bottom. So sometimes it's in the same color, sometimes it's not in the same color. But if you're going for some kind of a similar effect among a bunch of things, MTG Assist can be great for that kind of stuff. And I'll put that in the link as well, because I do use that one from time to time. So those are probably my big that list of net decking sites, I'd say, are probably our tops that everybody in the card floppers uses. I don't think there's anyone that we haven't listed here, right?
Not that I can think of.
Right, yeah, not that I can think of.
Woohoo.
Okay, T. Now, I'm pretty sure I know some things you may do.
I think that's true. I do believe that is a true statement.
But I would like you to tell everybody else, all of our listeners, what is your process after you've picked your commander?
Insanity.
So you got Omnath, you are ready to rock and roll.
Absolute insanity.
Absolute insanity.
Search
What
wizards for cards containing the word cat.
I mean, I find the cats in the color.
Yep, you
obviously.
find the cats in the color.
Actually, surprisingly, no cats in this deck as of yet. Surprise. So far, hey, you find me an elemental cat, it's going in there, but I haven't actually started looking yet.
Chandra's familiar.
Yes.
Yeah. Elemental cat, there you go.
Probably.
It's going in. I'm sure it's going in.
I'm still making the list.
You need a Chandra Planeswalker for it to be
so
useful.
I have an interesting way of deck building in that I will find a card that I really like and go, ooh, this is a keyword. Let's put this in and write down every single card that has this keyword in it. And then look through all of them and go, all right, so which of these would actually work? And so I have, and I handwrite these lists. These aren't just I go online and I look at them. No, I handwrite them because it helps me remember the card names. So I have just pages and pages of cards written out all over the place at any given time. So far.
And this is what I was talking about, knowing about, because I've seen these lists. I have seen the sacred scrolls of Teesa and her card names just randomly spread around everywhere.
You need a scrap of paper here. Use the back of this list that I've given up on. Here you go.
Baneslayer Angel. What are you building now?
Angel in the name.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I make a list, and then I start pulling down and paring down to what I actually think will work. And usually what happens is I start doing that, and I get very, very, distraught and confused and upset and just stop completely and just let them sit there. And then I come back and go, all right, this time I'm going to actually do it. And I try and build an entire deck like that, and then it usually ends up with me coming to someone else going, help me! I'm stuck. Someone please take a look at what I have done and tell me what I need to do to fix this. Which isn't a bad thing. I'm still learning. I'm still pretty new at actually creating my own decks. Seeing as mostly I just take the pre-made decks and alter them.
Which that's a great approach too, but I don't think
Yeah.
that there's anything wrong with asking other people. We've all gotten advice and help from other people with building Magic decks in the past, so totally understandable.
This one I have even broken down to like, all right, so a normal deck, like a normal card commander deck with this commander has this many lands and this many creatures and this many instants. So I can actually go in and be like, all right, I know what the normal amount is. Maybe this time I won't get so frustrated right off the bat.
Yeah, or a good ratio that
Right.
might work well for you to try out or something, right? Yeah. All right, so you got ratios ideas, you got list ideas.
And
Then what? Do you start building a list? Do you build a paper list and do proxies, or are you building online as well?
I really
What are you
like
doing?
the proxying, having it in my hand, doing, actually having it in my hand. It helps me just feel like I'm really engaged with it. Building online is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't particularly enjoy it because if I have the cards, I want to be using the cards. And so, getting my hands on all of the cards is one of my favorite things. And if I don't have it, making a proxy is the closest I can get to it. And then I can still, solitaire a game by myself on the table or hand over the deck and say, here's what I have, help. And just have it so that we can sort into piles and, make decisions and alter that way.
Yeah, that sounds great. And myself, so my process. Well, for the most part, I've gone all over the place. I've done the look at a net deck. I've done the build with what I have. I've done build proxies. Kind of a little bit of everything. But currently, I'm more going with, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, where I'm pulling out binders of rares and going through boxes of commons that I have and seeing what I can utilize and picking like a couple cards that I think might work really, really well with the commanders that I'm focusing on. And then from there, I'm moving to online into the MTG Assist, into Scryfall, into EDH Rec, and kind of going off of synergies, off of those cards that I'm kind of like, I'm almost like starting with what I want my win cons to be, and then going and diving deeper into that kind of stuff. And I do, much like Teesa, I do follow a ratio for my not my commons, but like for my instants and sorceries and mana rocks and all that kind of stuff based on how many colors I got rocking. I'm definitely very fortunate to have a large collection of cards, so I don't need to proxy too much. I have in the past, or I much like what Sean and Perry will do. I'll just kind of pick up the cards and go from there off of TCG or whatever. But pretty standard. So I haven't really gone too far with Vial Smasher just yet. Vial Smasher and Timna, but yeah. So I'll look for big beefy red spells that I know are going to hit a lot of opponents and see if I can literally do like a two chunk on someone, or like take out half of an opponent's life in like one shot. Those are the spells I'm looking for with this deck, and then seeing how I can keep it from being countered and how I can stop things from happening. And yeah, that's where I'm planning to take the Vileshmaster deck. So as we're as we're beginning to build these decks, and we've just kind of heard little tidbits from each of us about what the decks are going to kind of do. Teesa with Omnath kind of doing a landfall elemental tribal. Perry is doing a Teesa deck. Are you focusing, Perry, on a direction yet, or just trying to maximize as many of those death triggers as you possibly can?
I'm trying to increase the amount of value I can get off of the death triggers as much as possible with enchantments, as well as playing creatures that are focused around token creation.
All right, that's cool.
So that she can use that ability.
And then Sean is doing Rexiel Mill, essentially, and then trying to cast and maximize his opponent's libraries as much as he possibly can. Correct?
Fun graveyard times.
Fun graveyard times. And I am basically trying to do death doubled, essentially. I'm trying to kill twice as hard as someone regular. So
That's more parry, isn't it? Parry's death double. You're like damage double.
Right, I'm like damage double. Right,
There you
yeah. I'm trying to deal double damage. So, with odd converted mana costs, that's the thing. So everything's got to be odd converted mana costs. So, with our knowledge of not every card in Magic, but some cards in Magic, do people have suggestions for what they could see going in each of our decks? Doesn't have to be, you don't have to have one for each of us, or you don't have to have a couple, but just kind of like open up a little bit of discussion at the end of this podcast to talk about some ideas that we may have for some people. And I got one for Sean to kick it off, and then we can kind of go down. We don't have, very loosey goosey. So Sean, the two that I was thinking off the top of my head were Spreading Seas. So Spreading Seas from Zendikar.
You know what's funny?
It is what?
It's already in the deck list.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so let me read what the card is. I'm happy it's already in the deck list. We're speaking like-minded here. So Spreading Seas is a 2 to cast, 1 generic, 1 blue, enchantment aura. Enchant land. When Spreading Seas enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted land is an island. Rexiel has Island Walk. If you happen to be playing against a Naya deck or something like that, like what Teesa rocks from time to time, I'm going to be rocking the Vial Smasher deck with black in it, because it has Swamp Walk as well.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you just need to make something an island because they got a bunch of non-basics on the battlefield or something like that.
Yeah, it's got a lot of versatility.
It's got a ton of versatility to it. So that was the first one. The second one, I'm guessing, might even be on the deck list as well. If you're not going to go with a Gyruda companion, listeners, he had an idea to go with a Gyruda, making things even. I would imagine that card's still going to probably go in the deck, just not as the companion slot.
Yeah, probably.
But Traumatize.
That is also in there. Yeah.
There you go. It's 3 generic and 2 blue sorcery. Target player puts half of their library in the graveyard. Is it rounded up or down? Rounded up?
I think it's rounded up, yeah.
It's something like that. But basically, it was built in a time pre-Commander, really. I mean, at least I remember it pre-Commander. So losing half of your 60-card deck
rounded down. Sorry.
Rounded down. Pretty traumatizing. Now you're losing half of your 100-card deck. Is possibly turn 5. So it sucks. So, and it's great value for Rexiel.
Oh, for sure.
So those were my thoughts.
I mean, yeah, clearly we're agreeing on that much, considering I've got them already listed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In the same vein as Spreading Seas, I was thinking about tossing maybe the Urborg in there, Tomb of Yawgmoth, make everything swamps in addition to their regular land types.
Perfect. Yeah, that does the nice effect the same way. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that'll get me everyone. Plus, it's free because it's a land.
Yeah. All right. What else do we got for some recommendations?
I had an idea for parry.
Mm-hmm.
A couple, actually. I play Orzhov a lot in Standard, so there's a few cards that might be interesting for you. First one I had was Oath of Kaya. When it ETBs, it deals 3 damage to any target, and you gain 3. It also costs 3, 1 a white and a black. And it has, the important part there is whenever an opponent attacks a planeswalker you control with 1 or more creatures, Oath of Kaya deals 2 damage to that player, and you gain 2 life. I know you were saying you want to do kind of like a life gain thing. That's unmovable, and he pairs really well with one of the Sorin Markovs. I think it's Thirsting Bloodlord.
So that would be a way to kind of gain life if I'm not having stuff die. Just
basically, you get Sorin out, you get that out, and it's a really good 2-card combo that's going to prevent people from wanting to attack your Sorin because they're going to take damage, and you're going to gain life. Plus, Sorin gives all of your things lifelink, and he can bring things back from the graveyard. So if you're doing Kaya, or not Kaya, sorry, you're doing Teesa, so you're gonna have a lot of sacrificing, I assume, considering it's an Orzhov aristocrat style thing. So you can bring your non-token creatures back. If they die, they get lifelink. You're gaining life. Something to think on. And just like an anthem for your tokens probably would be good.
Anthem?
Just something to like give them all +1/+1 or +2/+2, something like that.
Yeah, if they're all.
There's a specific card I have in mind for that, but I cannot remember what it is.
Is it new or is it older?
It's like I know its cost. It costs 7. It's an enchantment. I think it's from Ravnica. Either I think it might be.
I want to say it's like something like Glorious Addendum or something like that.
No.
Is it the one that makes them all angels?
It's not
No, but that wouldn't be a bad one.
intangible virtue, is it? Creature
Yeah, I
tokens
think
you
I
control
included
get +1/+1 and have vigilance. That one's only a 2-drop. It's colorless and a white.
That is good though. Not what I was
There's Ethereal
Yes, that's exactly
Absolution
it. Ethereal Absolution.
from Ravnica.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep, and that's creatures you control get +1/+1. Creatures your opponents control get -1
That is what I was
-1. Then you can pay 2 a white and a black to exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature card, I get to create a 1/1 spirit token.
Yes, that's the card.
So yeah, that would give me more creatures, get rid of threats, make my creatures bigger, their creatures smaller. All good stuff.
Alex did make a good point though. There is that 5 CMC enchantment that makes all of your tokens come in as 4/4 angels with vigilance.
Yeah.
I think I included that. What was the name of that one?
Divine Visitation.
Yes.
There it is. Thank you, T.
You're welcome.
Yep.
And like Teesa was saying, any of those small enchantments or anything that you can get that just do a single buff or single
Well, and
something
don't forget
for your token
about
is gonna be
populate.
awesome.
Like, you should look
Right.
through my
Never forget
populate
about
deck because I have a lot of mono white token creations in that. That might actually be super helpful for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and populate. It
Yeah,
needs to
I'll
be a
definitely
token
give a
first.
look to that.
Yeah, that could be.
I also wanted to point out, I don't know if you guys have been trying to use any Ikoria cards, but there's a couple Ikoria cards that fit really well into mine. The Bastiaan of Remembrance, if you've heard of that one.
Session of Remembrance.
That is 2 and a black. It's an enchantment, but when it comes into the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. And then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that's the enchantment version of the, I believe, Blood Artist creature.
Yep.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yep. And it also creates a token. So that for 3 mana was very good. It's harder to get rid of than a creature. There's one
Oh, good.
other
That was what I was going to
Ikoria
recommend.
card I threw in, the Garrison Cat.
No one is
which is
surprised.
just Yep. When he dies, it's a 1/1 for 1 white mana. When the cat dies, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature.
You should also put in Sacred Cat, which is also a 1-drop cat. When it dies, you can embalm it and it comes back as a token.
That's nice.
Yeah. I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ones where it says when it dies, you create a 1/1 token or something, I would create 2 of those.
Correct.
Yep.
Because the trigger is it dying, so I would get 2 tokens
you
for
get
it.
2 separate token making triggers.
Yeah, great. Love
it.
There's a lot of those.
There's a lot of those. Yeah, there's a lot of things like that.
Yeah, I think there's one that I have some. Afterlife is another thing like that. There's one creature that actually creates 2 spirits when it dies, so that would give me 4 nice spirits.
Yeah, I think where you're rocking Orzhov and Teesa being in that Ravnica block, Afterlife is just such a natural thing to put in where you get these spirits, It could totally be great for you. And then, you check out the stuff in Theros and just keep scouring for lots of sacrifice aristocrat style places. You want those those random altars that you can sacrifice creatures for mana to, and that new maybe Sean can help me out here. What's that? The guy who makes the 0/1 goat token that's like all over standard right now. That has a sacrifice outlet built onto him.
Strider. It's the Strider. Something Strider.
Woe Strider?
Woe Strider.
I think it's Woe Strider. Yeah. Yeah, so Woe Strider Harry. Yeah, that guy's nasty. If you know what it is, it's 2 generic and a black. When Woe Strider enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 white goat creature token. And then sacrifice another creature, scry 1. So you can just do it. You don't need to pay any additional costs. If you have the creatures, you can sacrifice them. So pretty nice. And it can come back with escape. So there's definitely some stuff. Teesa was mentioning the embalm mechanic from Amonkhet Hour of Devastation. It's great because those creatures start off as creatures and then they come back as tokens. So then they would have vigilance and lifelink when they come back.
Mm-hmm. And one of the cards that I was saying how I choose from my deck too, I had the Liliana Dreadhorde General, which on her passive ability is when a creature you control dies, draw a card, and I draw 2 cards, so that's great.
Yeah, that would be insane. Now, it might do that. I don't know. Would it proc that twice? Hey, you might.
It's a permanent I control, and it's a triggered ability by a creature dying, so I would say yes.
That should stack.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a clutch card for you for sure.
Mm-hmm. And she has like creating and sacrificing as part of her plus and minus abilities, I believe.
Definitely.
I had a couple other for Perry
Nice.
that might be interesting.
All right.
There's one, it's a sorcery card called Debt to the Deathless. So it's 2 white, 2 black, and X. It's a sorcery. Each opponent loses 2 times X life. You gain life equal to that life lost this way. So it gets you a bunch of life, and that it could be really mean. Really evil card.
When you have multiple people playing against, yeah, that's a good one.
Exactly. And then this one is one that I have in most of my decks. If I have white, it's an Ajani Planeswalker. It's the Collar of the Pride. And I have it specifically in my my token deck because you, for -8, its -8 ability is put X 2/2 white cat creature tokens onto the battlefield where X is your life total.
Jeez.
Wow. And what did you say the name of that one was?
The Planeswalker one. It's Ajani Collar of the Pride.
Collar of the Pride.
Yep, it's 1 colorless and 2 white.
That is so good.
And another cat.
Yeah, of course.
But if you can get the Deathless off and then get Ajani off, you can overrun with tokens. I've done it once where I got 35 2/2 cat tokens, and it was just like, here are all the kittens to destroy the world now.
I think another creature that I included that is almost as mean as if I managed to let that happen would be the Luminous Brood Moth, which I'm sure you're familiar with. One of the new Ikoria cards. It is 2 colorless and 2 white, and basically it's a flying insect where whenever a creature I control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with flying. So I can sacrifice things twice if they don't have flying, which is really great.
Broken.
Yeah, not banned yet, but broken.
It's very, very strong. It's very strong. Well, cool. All right. So I think that's.
I've got a recommendation for you.
Oh, you do?
Oh yeah, I'm sure you already have it in there. But Kurvek the Merciless, he is odd mana.
Sick.
He is 5, a black, and a red. And whenever an opponent plays a spell, Kurvek the Merciless deals damage to target creature or player equal to that spell's converted mana cost.
Yeah, see, I've never heard that one before. So that's perfect.
He is dealing the damage. He is 7 mana, but because it's him, if you have your companion out, he would do double damage. And the damage is just the CMC of whatever your opponent plays.
That's perfect. That's like another.
It doesn't have to target him. But yeah, that's a lot of damage if anyone else is playing spells. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's like the opposite of Vial Smasher, which that's like the first on my turn. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible.
And then also, have you looked at Neheb the Eternal?
Yeah, I have looked at Neheb, definitely.
Yeah, right. He gives you mana based on how much life.
Read it off.
It is 3 and 2 red, and at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, add 1 red mana to your mana pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So the more damage you do to your opponents this turn, the more mana you would get at your post-combat main phase, which you could use to pay for
A huge spell.
the Weaver. The Weaver,
Right.
too. Didn't she require that?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds awesome. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Do we got anything for Teesa?
Well, she's going elementals, so Risen Reef probably. Good idea.
Yep, I have that on my list. I think that's number 3 in my creature.
Risen Reef's good. Maybe Nyx Bloom Ancient.
Nyx Bloom's pretty dope.
I think Nyx Bloom's an elemental, and that'll let you do some big stuff.
I don't have that one. I'll write that down.
He is an elemental. Yep. Nyx Bloom is an elemental.
Sweet.
I was thinking more of the landfall stuff, because that's like the stuff that I remember from back in the day.
Yeah, that's fair. So a lot of things is going to cheat out lands. So like,
yeah, any additional land stuff you can get your hands on. They might not be elementals, but there's so many things that allow that to happen. Even if you rock something like Azusa, Lost But Seeking, you may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. If you don't have the high-priced fetches in the color and stuff like that, there's always the panoramas, Bant Panorama, Naya Panorama, because they don't have the mana symbol on them, so that you can put them in essentially any deck. They tap for colorless mana, but then you can they're like a slow fetch land. You can get out basic lands that you need at various times. So those are good.
fetch lands are great because don't they trigger twice? Because you play them,
Yep.
triggers, fetch it, triggers again.
Yep.
You do things like explore, anything that's going to let you play in more than 1 land per turn.
Yeah, I've been working on finding like things that can make me play more than 1 land, or give me more mana per land. That's how the OG Omnath got put into that, because sure, I'll have all the green mana.
Yeah, there you go. Or even that new artifact, you could do Nykthos Shrine to Nyx.
That devotion.
Yeah, you tap it and add your devotion. I think you like tap it for 3 or something. There's an artifact that does the same thing. It taps for your devotion. So any color. It's not as ideal for tricolor decks, I will admit. But if you're having a lot of elementals out, it'll be good.
I don't think we need to mention any anthems for tribal decks, T. I think you pretty much got those on lock, I would imagine, right?
I like tribal. It's my comfort zone.
Very much so. Sword of the Animist is wonderful. So that is a 2 generic legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put that onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. So that is an incredible kind of artifact that works great with just, especially 3 colors or something. If you're falling short on a specific color, you can kind of get that out there. So that's really nice.
Word. What else? Leafkin Druids.
Yeah.
Thinking that I told you earlier about the cat. It's Chandra's Ember Cat.
Yes, Chandra's Ember Cat.
And it taps for a red if you have a Chandra Planeswalker.
Or it taps for a red, but you can use it only on Chandras or elementals.
Which isn't bad.
Elementals. Because you're going to be casting elementals. So.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. It taps for a red that you can use for an elemental spell. That's good. Woodland Wanderer is pretty good. It's got Vigilance, Trample, and it gets a 1/1 for every color you use to cast it. And if you're doing tricolor, that'll help.
Yeah.
It's a Temur deck, right?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Which is not colors I usually go. Or not, like, I mean, I have played all 3 of those colors.
Yeah.
But not normally together.
Individual. I never played Naya. And I know that's like your go-to.
Naya is so much fun.
And there's definitely, I'm sure you may have like a what is it? Random map excavator. It's the snake that you can play lands from your graveyard. It's kind of like a Crucible of Worlds on a stick.
Yep.
That's nice. I'm sure if you're looking at EDH Rec and all those kind of things, Zendikar's Royal is one of the top cards.
Oh, yes.
So
I mean,
you
that
got-
was going to go in regardless
Yeah.
because that's one of my go-to cards
Yeah, from
at this point.
Origins. Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
What about that new one from Ikoria?
Which one?
It's a Kin and Bonder Prodigy. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent, it adds 1 mana of any type, and it can has an activated ability for 7. You can look at the top 5 cards of your library and put a non-human creature from among them onto the battlefield.
Yeah, that could be good, especially if you go with more like
If you get a lot of mana dorks.
yeah, if you
out.
have a bunch of mana dorks that can produce a lot of things, that card could be perfect for you. But it is nice just as a thought for being able to search out a big elemental or something like that and get it on the battlefield.
I mean, that's why Song of Creation was such a big, like, this must be in a deck that I build.
Right,
and then
right.
this, because, I mean, play an additional land on each of my turns. Whenever I cast a spell, draw 2 cards, but then at the beginning of my end step, I discard my hand. So it's a very interesting thing because I need to actually look into getting more things that let me pull things from my graveyard to play.
I think you could manage that just fine. You
I
can
think so.
think of it in a direction of like a curb it to a small CMC kind of build, so you have more likelihood of actually casting all of your cards. You know,
My wanting to pillow fort actually works, and I just play everything.
it's possible. You know, you're kind of
if you're able to empty
doing
your
it right. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. That's for sure. I think you could do it. Well, cool. All right. So that concludes our podcast this week. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hope everybody's doing okay during Death Touch 2020, as we've kind of coined it. Staying healthy, staying safe, practicing all the best practices they can possibly practice. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to podcasts. Make sure to check out the links below to find us on all social media as well as YouTube. And thanks again for listening. Have a good night.
All right. See you next time.